Look amazing. So great to see all of you here in Portland at the University of Southern Maine. My name is Nick Murray, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you and to help welcome Tulsi Gabbard to Maine. Yes. You know, I've been working in politics for a little over 10 years. Full disclosure, I'm not a Democrat, although I was registered Democrat a little while ago, working with Portland, Maine's own rabble-rousing state representative Diane Russell 4 years ago in her quest to eliminate the superdelegate rule from the DNC, that elitist, unfair, unjust, undemocratic system in the Democratic primary. So, and I'm sure, as you know, Representative Gabbard was the one to submit that petition to the DNC to get rid of superdelegates. And she was one of the ones to first sound the alarm of the crooked, for lack of a better term, rigged process that the DNC enlists to put their own candidate up. We saw it 4 years ago. We're seeing it this year. And as you all know, we're missing a lot when Tulsi Gabbard is not in those debates. So, if they can change the rules and put Mike Bloomberg in for one, they can certainly bring the only true peace candidate and put her on the stage as well. I was a supporter of Ron Paul in 2012, and I'll say, Tulsi Gabbard is really the first true peace candidate since Dr. Paul, and it really means a lot for Americans to hear that. Maine is one of the highest per capita states of veterans, and I'm sure we all know many veterans. It means a lot to them to hear someone with Representative Gabbard's experience, and to hear her speak with poise about her service in Iraq is inspiring, and it's been inspiring for me to hear that. But like I said, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, because politics it's not about party, right? It's not about your team. It's not about your tribe. It's about values. It's about a compelling vision. And it's definitely not about a personality of one person. So, it's a special thing to have her here in Maine and to hear from her. And I'm so glad that you are all here to see that and to witness that. So without further ado, please join me, Portland, Maine, in welcoming Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick Murray. Thank you very much for being here, for your kind introduction. Thank you to all of you for coming out this evening. It's great to be here in Maine, finally. We have looked over the bridge from Portsmouth a number of times, but it's great to be here and to be able to have this conversation with you. I think we may be the first presidential candidate to come through here. Oh, really? All right. Oh, okay. Well, I'm the first female combat veteran running for president to be in Maine. Look, time is the most precious thing that any one of us has in our lives to give. And so truly, with all seriousness, the fact that every one of you has chosen to spend this time here tonight to hear from me and to allow me to hear from you, that means the world. So thank you very much. I'm going to cut straight to the heart of what is at stake in this election, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. I want to hear what's on your mind. Nice to see you guys. Here's the question before you as voters, before every single voter in this country. Do you want to continue to see your taxpayer dollars being spent on wasteful regime change wars, on a new Cold War and nuclear arms race? Wars that do not make us any safer as a country, that do not serve our country's national security interests. In fact, they make us less safe. Or do you want to see our taxpayer dollars actually being used to serve your needs in the most basic, essential ways? Making sure that we have clean water to drink, making sure that we're investing in infrastructure, that our kids are getting a good education, that we have quality, affordable health care, that we're protecting our environment. This is the real question. Do you want more of the same old, where as we sit here tonight, we are seeing $4 billion of our taxpayer dollars going to Afghanistan alone? Not even talking about what we're spending in a number of other countries across the Middle East, but just in Afghanistan alone, we're spending $4 billion to prop up a corrupt government, to line the pockets of expensive Washington consultants and defense contractors. Imagine what we could do with those dollars here. That's $5.5 million per hour. Per hour. So as we hear over and over again this refrain for so long, coming from politicians saying there's just not enough money to pay our teachers what they deserve. There's just not enough money to make sure our roads and bridges are safe. There's just not enough money to make sure that every American has quality health care. Over and over again, there's not enough money, not enough money. Yet somehow, magically, there was always enough money to wage another unnecessary regime change war that does not make us any safer. This is what is at the heart of the decision that you have before you, because the most important responsibility that the president has is commander-in-chief. The Constitution has placed this responsibility in the hands of the presidency to make those decisions about our foreign policy, to lead in a way that is either building relationships with other countries based on cooperation, or leading a foreign policy that's based on conflict that creates these higher tensions, that says, hey, we've got to go and be the world's police, going and toppling one dictator after another that we don't like while propping others that seem to serve our purposes. The commander-in-chief makes these decisions. This is what is at the heart of the decision that's before you, and why foreign policy is domestic policy. I think it's a great disservice to you as voters and to my brothers and sisters in uniform that so often you hear big national reporters and others who say, yeah, I hear it all the time. Tulsi, foreign policy is just one issue. Why don't you talk about anything else? I talk about everything else within the context of this reality that foreign policy is domestic policy. Because unless we see this sea change in our foreign policy, all of the promises and big plans and programs that your politicians promise to you will never come to fruition unless we deal with where our taxpayer dollars are going. That's the reality. That's the truth. That's what I'm here to talk about, is the truth. The real world that we live in, the high stakes that are before us, so that you as voters, every single one of you, can make that best informed decision before you go and cast your vote. Now, Nick talked about how Maine has one of the highest per capita rates of veterans in the country. I think Hawaii may be right alongside Maine. I am so grateful to be able to wear this country's uniform. I am so grateful to be able to have had the privilege of serving alongside incredible patriots. People from all different generations in life, people from all different backgrounds, people of different religions, different races, ethnicities, people of different political parties, who all come together and stand as one. That recognize that even as we are distinct and different and unique and diverse, that we have one mission, one purpose. And that purpose is to serve our country. That we stand as Americans who have taken an oath of loyalty to the Constitution of the United States. We have made this decision, willing to lay our lives down in service to our country. It's a beautiful thing and something that continues to inspire me. It is this same spirit of service that we so badly need in Washington, where we have so many leaders who are unfortunately choosing divisiveness over unity, saying, well, it's us versus them, it's Democrats versus Republicans, it's we have the power and we've got to keep it, or we don't have the power and we have to take it back. But where do the people stand in all of this? Forgotten, lost, unheard, and left behind. That's where, in this era of hyperpartisanship and divisiveness, I am challenging through my campaign, and I am asking you to stand with me in challenging these norms in Washington that say you have to choose one or the other, instead of saying we stand for America. We stand with each other. That motivated by this love of country and care for one another, we know that when we stand together as Americans, we can accomplish anything. We can heal these divides. We can come together from different parties, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, Green. We can come together and share our own ideas, recognize the root cause of the problem and bring a different perspective to the table, and ultimately work together towards finding a solution. This is the representation of who we are as America, and it is the only way that we together can usher in a bright future for all Americans and get past the situation that we are in now, and we've been in for too long, where you have a president who represents one party and only serves the interests of the people of that party, only works with members of Congress from that party, rather than recognizing we have one president whose responsibility is to serve all Americans. I want to ask you to do me a favor in here. Help me better get to know you and help us get to know each other. Raise your hand here if you're a Democrat. Whatever. You can be a Democrat in your heart of hearts, or you can be registered, up to you. All right? Thank you very much. Raise your hand if you're Republican. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Raise your hand if you are Independent, Libertarian, or Green. Awesome. Thank you for being here. This is a representation of America in this room. And so when we ask ourselves, or when we wonder, how is it that we can get past this divided nation? How is it that we can build these bridges of understanding? We do it in rooms just like this. We do it in rooms just like this, where we can all come together and share this space and recognize that the power is in our hands, that our founders, in their wisdom, chose the first 3 words of our Constitution to be "we the people." Not we the Democrats or we the Republicans, but we the people. So that when we stand together rooted in our Constitution, we will remember 2 important things: that this country belongs to us. This country belongs to us, we the people, and the power that lies within our hands to determine what kind of governance we want. More of the same old with a government of, by, and for the powerful elite? Or do we want to bring about a government that truly is of, by, and for the people? The second thing those 3 words are a reminder of is who our leaders are accountable to. There's so much noise in the media today, the cable news, or you read the headlines, and they're trying to tell you as voters, hey, look, 2 states have voted. The race is pretty much over. We already know who's going to win the whole thing, so, you know. This person doesn't have a shot. This person is obviously going to win. 2 states have voted. How many states do we have? 50 states. Oh my God. I come from the 50th. We know. 2 states have voted. So how dare they, who have the power and the influence, presume that your voices don't matter because you're not the first state that votes? It's crazy in my mind, and I'm seeing this so much because I get asked, Tulsi, you know, this New Hampshire and Iowa have already happened. Like, what are you gonna do? How about like go and talk to voters in all the other states? Ask you for your support. Ask you for your vote. Make sure that your voice is heard in determining the leadership of this country. We the people. We the people. So for those of you who may be frustrated, those of you who may be skeptical or cynical about how we bring about this change, if you are sick and tired of the status quo, I ask you really to take to heart that the only way we overcome the obstacles that stand before us as we the people is by stepping up and making sure that our voices are heard. That begins with casting your vote. But it doesn't end there. It continues with holding leaders accountable by making sure it is the truth that is represented, by making sure that those who you choose to hire, never forget that they work for you and only you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and share my vision, my experience, and the kind of leadership that I would bring as your president and commander-in-chief to be able to accomplish these goals that we share, where you know without a shadow of a doubt that my personal commitment to you, every single American, is that I work for you and only you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We have 2 mics. All right, good. We have 2 mics in both aisles. Please share your name and share your question or concern. Want to maximize the time that we have here. There's a lot of people, so we want to try to get to as many questions as we can. Yes, sir. Your hands. Yeah, okay, good. We'll start with you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Thayer. I'm in South Portland, Maine. First, I'd like to say, not thank you for your service, Tulsi, but thank you for your willingness to serve our country. In 2016, there was one thing that got this Republican to vote for Donald Trump, and her name was Hillary Clinton. That's what attracted me here tonight. I wanted to know why Ms. Clinton seems to have a problem with Tulsi Gabbard, my second favorite person born in Hawaii. Here's my first.
All right.
And quickly found out in 5 minutes of hearing you speak what that's all about, so I don't need to ask about that anymore. But what I do want to share with you is that within the peace candidacy and the money being wasted overseas, as you were putting it, pointing out how we could be spending it domestically, it's notable to me in 2016 and in 2020, nobody talks about $21 trillion going to $22 trillion worth of debt, and what are we going to do? We are insolvent.
Thank you. Aloha. Yes, thank you. This is a very good point. Here's the issue that I have is that election after election, even when we do hear people talk about it, things aren't getting better. Things are not getting better because it has just been empty rhetoric and empty words for so long. This is why I really do focus on the cost of war and how we pay for things. I think this is necessary for you to know as voters that as your president, I will treat your taxpayer dollars as though they are my own and exercise that kind of fiscal responsibility that says, hey, why are we wasting? Why are we literally throwing trillions of our hard-earned taxpayer dollars out the door. And for what reason? For what purpose? For what interest of the American people does that serve? This is why it's got to stop. That same kind of fiscal responsibility that I focused on in the area of foreign policy has to exist across the federal government. Whether you're talking about the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Education, the Department of Agriculture, as we look down the line, we've got to examine each of these programs, look at each of these expenditures, saying what objective is this actually serving? Is it serving its intended purpose? Does the need actually exist? And if it's not, we either shouldn't be doing it, or we've got to find a better way to make sure that it is accomplishing that objective. I think having that governing principle is critical. So number one, being truly fiscally responsible and being able to work with both parties in Congress to be able to do that. Number two, and this one is talked about even less than the national debt and deficit, is the Federal Reserve and our country's monetary policy. I am one of, I think, less than 10 members of Congress who's co-sponsored a bill to actually audit the Federal Reserve, to bring some transparency. So that rather than what we see, even for members of Congress, when you see announcements coming from the chair of the Federal Reserve, it's this kind of big hushed room and guessing game about what are they going to say. You have pundits on TV saying, well, I think they might do this, or I think they might do that. But there's no real transparency there for us as people or for leaders in Washington to know and understand how and why these decisions are being made, first of all, and not just what the initial consequences are, because that's what we hear is interest rates are either going to go up or go down. How is that going to impact me if I'm thinking of buying a house? How is that going to impact the interest rates in the markets? But really looking at what are the longer term impacts and effects of those decisions, and whose interests do they actually serve? Is it the banks who govern the Federal Reserve, or is it the long-term economic stability of our country? Yeah. We'll come to you next.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm from Freeport. You've been known to take a lot of positions that differ from a lot of members of the Democratic Party. Frankly, governing is hard. You know this better than anyone as a member of Congress, and it's important to build relationships between the president and Congress, or else nothing gets done. Given that a lot of your positions differ from a lot of members of the Democratic Party to a point where they say that you've isolated yourself from a lot of the party, how do you plan on building a coalition while you're governing, and more importantly, while you are planning to be elected? You know, this is an important election. Candidates up and down the ballot need to be elected. And I don't think that that can happen without strong party unity. So how can you create, not just party unity, but how can you create a strong sense of unity?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I think there's a very big difference between, because I've heard some of those same criticisms that you're talking about, but when I or others push back and ask those critics for specifics, it's usually radio silence. I think the thing that people may point to is that I'm willing to call out my own party when they're wrong, just as I am willing to call out the other party when they're wrong. And I think it's a problem that this is so lacking across the board in Washington amongst Democrats and Republicans, that if it's your party, then you're expected to be silent and just put your head in the sand and pretend like everything's fine. But if the other party is doing the exact same thing, then you're expected to throw your hands up and start protesting and screaming and yelling about how wrong that thing is. Voters across the country, including myself, just see the hypocrisy in that and see how ultimately you can't solve a problem unless you're willing to acknowledge that it's there. The reforms that I've been working for from 2016, maybe some would see as controversial, but I don't think it is. Nick talked about some of them: open primaries, same-day registration, super delegates, and over the recent months and over the last year and a half or so, I've learned more about ranked choice voting. I think it makes sense and should be implemented across the board. These are things that increase ease of access for people to go and vote and make sure their voices are heard. They should not be seen as controversial, but when some of these things are to some in the party whose very power would be threatened by making these changes, that's really the only thing that they can point to. Because if you look at the soul of the Democratic Party, the reason why I joined the Democratic Party is because traditionally it's been a party that's fought for working people in this country. It's been a party that's fought to protect our environment. It's been a party that was open and inclusive and diverse, even understanding that as Democrats, we're not going to agree on every single issue. In the Congress today, in the Democratic caucus in the House, there are very big differences between what a friend of mine, Kurt Schrader, who represents a district in Oregon, his views on how we should solve certain problems vary vastly from some of the members of Congress from New York City. We represent very different districts in the country, and I think understanding that as we talk about unity, whether it's party unity or unity for the country, that if that unity is rooted in how can we bring about positive change for the people who we are serving, that's the only kind of unity that I'm concerned about. And that is how I have built coalitions with Democrats and Republicans in Congress throughout the 7 years that I've been there. And that's how I will build those coalitions as president, recognizing that if you're a conservative Democrat or a moderate Democrat or a progressive Democrat, or if you're a conservative Republican, a moderate Republican, or someone who is a little bit more open-minded or across the board, that there is common ground and unity to be found when we start from that place saying, okay, do we agree that this is the problem? If we can agree that this is the problem, then we can agree it needs to be solved and bring different ideas on how best to accomplish that objective, how best we achieve that objective. It's about relationships. It's about treating people with respect. And if we're coming from that place, just as I experienced in the military, where we all want to accomplish that same mission of service, that's how we get it done. For those who are most interested in preserving party power, yeah, that's not what I'm about. So it's how we define that unity. And honestly, for Democrats, most of whom the number one objective is beating Trump in November, I agree very much with that objective. The only way we accomplish that is with the support of independents, of moderate Republicans, people who are willing to say, hey, we've got to put country first so that we can together actually start to solve these problems. So long as Democrats or those in our party turn their backs on the rest of the country and see anyone and everyone who voted for Trump as racists or bigots, you're not going to win. Because even those who I've spoke to who voted for Trump in 2016, including those who voted for Obama 2 times before, if they feel like they are not welcome, they're not going to turn out and vote for the Democratic nominee. This is why I'm the best candidate to win in November, to beat Trump, and to bring our country together.
Hi, I'm Ann Jordan from South Portland. And to me, the quality of a leader is not only the leader themselves, but also the people that they surround themselves with and have worked for. Could you tell me what you think the 3 top qualities are for someone that you would put into your cabinet, into your White House, and into your work to try to overcome the absolute nastiness that's going on in D.C.?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked about qualities, because some people have asked for names, and I think it's such a premature question to ask, but really the most important thing is those qualities. The number one qualification has to be that deep, enduring commitment to serve. It seems like that would be a no-brainer, but I have been around too many people in Washington who literally will enter, quote-unquote, service, whether it's as a cabinet member or as a senior staffer, whoever it is, as a bullet point that they can then leverage into their next gig, to go and be a lobbyist on K Street or to go and monetize that time in service. And I think it's that is a disservice to the people of this country. So it is those, number one, whose sole commitment is to serve this country. Number two has to do with experience. The Department of Education should be led by someone who has been an educator, someone who has spent time in our classrooms, and who knows what it's all about and how those decisions made at the very highest levels, how they trickle down and how they impact one's ability or inability to be able to do the job that we as a country need them to do. And number three, you've got to be able to work with others. You've got to be able to build those coalitions that I've talked about building throughout my leadership as president. To be able to reach out, to be willing to hear from those who may not share your perspective or your experience and see the strength and the ability that comes from that. I draw a lot of inspiration from the choices that Abraham Lincoln made and how he surrounded himself essentially with a team of rivals. That he wasn't afraid to bring those together who had even been political opponents of his in the past or critical of him, but who brought a unique set of experiences that only helped make him stronger as a leader in the decisions he was making for our country. The green hat.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for coming to Portland, Maine.
Thank you.
This is actually, I came to Portland as an immigrant when I was 4 years old.
Where was your home originally?
In the northern Uganda region. Yeah. And first of all, I think you're the realest candidate out there. Anybody from any party can vote for you, you know? I love how you answered this gentleman's question down here when he talked about how you would, pretty much he was asking about how you were against some of the views of the Democratic Party as well. And I think we need someone like that, especially in this day and age, because with all the division that I see and trying to group people in each box, I really hate that, because
Me too.
I just whatever makes sense to me, that's what I go with, you know. And I would honestly vote for any party, believe it or not, And I love candidates like you. I don't see anybody else. That's why I think you're an absolute threat to everybody. I see you on Fox News. I see you on CNN. I see you on MSNBC. So I don't really have a direct question. I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. You'll definitely be president one day. You have all the right people. You see the room, and we really appreciate you. You're authentic. You serve this country, and as far as politicians go, I don't think there's anything more real than you. So just thank you for doing what you're doing, and keep it up. You got my vote.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
My name's Mike. I'm from right here in Portland. My question is on the Social Security. I mean, we all keep hearing about that running out of money in 10, 20 years or whatever. And I'm in the finance industry, and I just don't see that as being so complicated. Why is it so difficult for Congress to figure out a way to keep that solvent for myself in another 10 years and for the future generations? And on that note, it just boggles my mind how a company like mine has a 401k. Company can't borrow money from that and pay it back. But the government can steal money from the Social Security Trust Fund.
Yep.
Yeah, they pay it back, but we don't know if that's going to be paid back. And why is it that it's linked in with the budget when it should be separate?
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
one separate thing is, do you believe in term limits?
Thank you. Thank you. It shouldn't be that hard. You said your name was Mike, right? It shouldn't be that hard. I think there's two, let me talk about two reasons why I think it hasn't happened yet. And let me tell you what I think that we should do to address this. Number one is there are some people, or maybe even a larger number of people, who believe that Social Security is an entitlement rather than something that we pay into throughout our lives that we should have the confidence of knowing it'll be there when we're ready to retire and we need it. I don't know what that explanation is to justify that view, because it's just not based in reality. So that I think there's some philosophical difference there that has created an obstacle towards actually solving this. And the second issue is one that we've talked about a few times already that has to do with the hyperpartisanship. That on issues like ensuring Social Security remains solvent for you, for me, for some of our younger leaders who are here tonight, that we'll have the confidence of knowing that as we chip in for Social Security, it will be there for us when we need it. The hyperpartisanship gets in the way, and I've seen this happen, maybe not necessarily just with Social Security, but with other issues. If one is in the minority party, you don't really want to work with the majority party to get something like this done, because it will give them the political victory, and in the minority party, you won't get any credit for it. And I've seen this happened most recently with criminal justice reform. We passed legislation called the First Step Act that really brought about some solid prison reforms, help reduce recidivism rates, help get those who have served their times out of prison with the skills and tools they need to be able to not go back to prison and not continue through this revolving door. It was an amazing opportunity where two friends of mine, a Democrat and a Republican, Hakeem Jeffries from New York, who's very progressive, and Doug Collins from Georgia, who was very conservative, both came together and said, we're going to put our differences aside. We agree and understand how important this issue is, and we can get it done. And I was proud to work with both of them to get it done. But some of the biggest obstacles that I saw that stood in the way or made it difficult to pass this legislation through Congress came from fellow Democrats who believe that this reform is necessary, but who said privately and publicly, we don't want to support this because it'll give Trump a win. Let's wait. Let's wait till he's out of office and then get it done. This made me so angry because they were more concerned about the politics rather than really being concerned about the people who are in prison, their kids who are at home without their mother or their father, their grandmother, their grandfather, putting their own political interests ahead of the interests of the well-being of real living people, real living families who are broken, who are struggling as a result of this. So that's the second biggest hurdle of why this hasn't actually been solved. Because to me, the answers are very, the first steps at least I think are very simple. Number one is what you're saying, separate out Social Security. Make it so that what we pay into Social Security stays there, continues to grow, continues to build, and it cannot be rated to pay for other things within our government. Period. Full stop. End of story. And number two, you can clap for that if you want. Number two is that we should lift the cap on who pays into Social Security Fund. That, really right now it is all of the middle class, whether you're on the middle, the low end of the spectrum or the upper spectrum of the middle class, who are paying into Social Security, but anyone who earns above that amount, I think it's $117,000, $118,000 right now, anyone who earns above that amount of money, all that money does not have to be paid into Social Security. By lifting that cap, then, if you're doing awesome, you're making a lot of money, good for you, you can chip in. You can chip in to Social Security. That would help us not only make sure it's solvent, but allow us to make sure that Social Security is reflective of the growing changes and needs in our country. I don't know if it was the same here, but in New Hampshire, I heard a lot from senior citizens who said that their cost of living adjustment for Social Security this past year was 1.6%. 1.6%. That did not anywhere near cover the reality of the increased costs. I think they were talking about a 26% increase in their Medicare payments that they were having to make. So being able to really be a lot more realistic about what the needs are, and for Social Security to be able to fulfill its mandate.
Last question.
Hi, I'm Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Sorry, I'm Joe from Portland. So at a town hall last week in Concord, you said that you don't see a future in our country as being a socialist nation. I want to know more about why you thought that, because you talk a lot about reallocating the defense budget to help welfare programs here. But you also talk about how you said today how the government is governed for the elite and by the elite. I was wondering how you can trust corporations going forward in a capitalist economy that we have now, when like a lot of wars that you've spoken out against have been able to benefit defense contractors and other companies of the sort, and like clean drinking water in Flint. I was wondering how you can trust corporations to actually help with those things, and why you don't see a future in America as a socialist nation.
I think it's looking at the reality of this mixed kind of society that we have here. So my statement was about a purely socialist form of governance. That's not what our Constitution is based in. I don't just blindly trust that, whether it's Boeing or Lockheed Martin or Monsanto or Syngenta is just going to do the right thing because they want to do the right thing. That's not what this is about. It's about recognizing that government has a very specific role to play in ensuring the defense of our country, and making sure that we are funding our local firefighters and law enforcement officers, two of which are here tonight taking care of us, making sure that our trash gets picked up, making sure that our streets are safe and that our kids are getting a good education. Some in this room may have a debate about which of those is a legitimate role of government. That's fine. We can have that debate. But government is in the business of providing essential services to the people of our country. And some would say that, oh, yeah, that's a little bit socialist. I also believe that in our that our economy is based on the concepts of capitalism, that we have entrepreneurship, innovation. Small businesses are the driver and backbone of our economy, and that's a good thing. The real problem is crony capitalism, and the system that we have set up today in the pay-to-play culture in Washington that says if you're Amazon or you're GM or you're one of these multi-billion-dollar corporations, you can afford the highest paid, most powerful lobbyists in Washington to influence the laws that are written, to influence the tax code, to make it so you can get away with paying zero taxes, while the mom and pop small business owners of a coffee shop or the local diner are struggling, paying their fair share, trying to take care of their employees and provide that service to their community. This is the issue of the crony capitalism, the issue of large pesticide manufacturers who, because of their influence in this administration, are getting the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to turn a blind eye and not even look at the pesticides that they are dumping across our land and the negative impact that they are having not only on soil quality and the ability for us to know in this country where we have amazing and rich soil that has grown food to feed people across generations, that it is a threat to that. It's a threat to bees that pollinate these plants that help us stay fed, but it's also a direct threat in poisoning and having a negative impact on kids in those communities. It's poisoning our waters. It's polluting our air. So no, this is not about just trusting corporations. It's rooting out the crony capitalism in this country that makes sure that we have a sensible role for government to play to protect consumers, to make sure that our taxpayer dollars are being spent in the way that actually serves our country's best interest, while also allowing for a thriving economy that's rooted in the kind of innovation and entrepreneurship that, that really is synonymous with the founding of our country and the success that we've seen here and around the world. No problem. I can see you.
Laura. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., Tacoma Park, Washington. And it's kind of a dual question that I'm real concerned about is California is economy and the number of people that live there is like the 5th largest economy in the world, I think, or 6th. And yet they don't have, electing senators, they don't have the same voice. You know, they don't have any more voice as senators, 2 senators, than Wyoming that doesn't, I think, doesn't even have 1 million people.
That's true.
You know, places like that, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, those kind of places. And how in the world can that be changed? The system and the new, I call it the New World Order, doesn't want that change. And then the other question has to do with, I don't think you, or I didn't understand the answer to term limits. Like,
oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah.
I forgot to answer that. I can talk about that.
If you could address
yeah,
that,
sure.
is with the Supreme Court and the people like Susan Collins here. In 20 years, she has not met with her constituents.
Wow.
No town hall meeting by Susan Collins. She's afraid of her constituents. And she doesn't, I don't think, represents the people of Maine. So I wish you would address those two. And immigration, if you can get to it.
That all of those questions is the whole town hall right there. I'll try my best to get through as many of these as quickly as I can. I don't know if I fully understood your question about California, but I'll answer it to the best of my ability. It is massive. It is massive. No. I fully understand California. California is diverse. It's huge, high population, booming economy. I don't think that they should have more senators than any other state. They have more members of the House of Representatives than any other state. And this was how our founders envisioned trying to bring about this balance and the difference between the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. That my teeny tiny home state of Hawaii, a chain of islands the most remote of any in the world, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, would have just as much of a voice in determining the policies of our country as the 2 senators who represent states like California. Look at the House of Representatives. We have 2 members of Congress from Hawaii, Wyoming, South Dakota, other states, I think Rhode Island, those who have less than 1 million people, they have 1 member of the House of Representatives. California, does anyone know? It's like 30, how many? 50, yeah, 30, 50, something like that. They've got a lot. I mean, and they use that power in the House of Representatives, that when it comes down to creating a coalition, California has the ability to be a swing bloc vote if they choose to use it that way. Me and my colleague from Hawaii, little bit less. We got to build more coalitions, and honestly, we talk to and work a lot with members from California, members from other states. So that's the answer to that question. Term limits. I think that, look, I think this is a debate we should have in a country, in this country. There are clear advantages that the incumbents have that make it very difficult for the original intent of these elections to say, well, if you don't like somebody, you can just fire them. Easier said than done when you have an incumbent who largely relies on PAC and lobbyist support to maintain their power, to maintain these political war chests, versus a candidate that may be running from the local community, hasn't worked in politics, but has a lot of grassroots support, but who can't afford to put ads up on television. So I think it's really a two-pronged question, and I've heard from people who feel both ways, that, okay, there should be, let's say, maybe is it 2 terms in the Senate is enough, or should it be 4 terms? How long is enough for you to know that you've got someone who's representing you, who is able to kind of learn the ropes and the ins and outs to be able to get stuff done in the Senate? But then when does that become too long? It's a good question. Others have said, well, I met a woman. She said, my member of Congress has been serving me for 25 years, and I really, really, really love the work he's doing, that he's always in the community. I can pick up the phone and call him or knock on his door, know that we can have a conversation. I don't want him to be arbitrarily thrown out of office. So this is a conversation that we need to have in tandem with the issue of money in politics. I'll get to you. I got you. Don't worry. In tandem with the issue of getting this big special interest money out of politics, members of Congress should be limited to accepting contributions from you, the American people, alone. That's it. No PACs, no lobbyists, no corporations, just you. That would change so much. It would change so much. We had a briefing within the first few weeks after getting elected. There were 50 new Democrats in 2012 elected, 34 new Republicans, and we were invited to go to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the group that's responsible for electing Democrats into the House. And we got a briefing there that one of the slides said, here's what you can expect your typical day to look like. And I wish I had a copy of it with me, but it went something like this. 2-hour fundraiser breakfast with lobbyists, 3 hours of fundraising phone calls, 2.5 hours of committees and votes, another fundraising lunch with lobbyists, 3 more hours of fundraising calls, 1 hour of votes, followed by another 2.5 hour fundraising dinner with more lobbyists. I'm not exaggerating. So when you take all of that out of the equation, and even if you replaced all those fundraising calls, if the only people they're calling is you, I think that's a pretty good thing. Knowing who they're accountable to. There are other reforms that we need to make to close this revolving door of corruption in Washington to address this issue. The Supreme Court. I don't think that just expanding the numbers of seats on the Supreme Court will solve anything, because it doesn't get to the heart of the problem here, which is that our courts have become politicized. Term limits for the Supreme Court?
How many lifetime terms would you like them to serve? They only serve one. They only serve one lifetime. Yes. How many of them would you like them to be limited to? How many lifetimes do they have?
Sounds like this is a conversation we need to have. But again, so you can have the debate about whether or not Supreme Court justices should have term limits or if they should be lifetime appointments. But either way, that's not going to solve the problem of our courts being politicized to where once someone is nominated to serve in this position, we have gotten so far away from the place where Ruth Bader Ginsburg was nominated by President Clinton. And she received, in a divided Senate, something, I think 94 votes to confirm, a strong bipartisan vote to support her confirmation, because clearly she was qualified to fill that position. Fast forward to where we are today, what we've seen under the Obama administration and this administration, the nominee is, the outcome of that nominee is predetermined based on party, essentially, where you don't have the same kind of examination and vetting of really looking, okay, well, you can be nominated by a president of the opposing party, but I'm going to ask you the questions that really get to the point of saying, are you going to be a fair arbiter of justice, liberty and justice for all, as per our Constitution? Or are you just going to be another political hack for whichever party you represent? That is the root cause of the problems that we're seeing with the politicization of the courts that we need to solve. And that term limits alone or expanding the court alone, that's not going to solve that problem.
The people are the problem in government.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you.
I'm really not good about this stuff, but can I read to you what I wrote?
Sure, just hold the mic up to your mouth. There you go.
So as an independent voter, a mother, and a co-founder of an innovative and disruptive small business that works within the space and defense industry and conducts extensive open source intelligence gathering and analysis, I can personally attest to the pervasive greed-driven corruption you speak of within the military-industrial complex, and that which you speak of within big oil and big tech industries, which are collectively working to undermine the well-being, civil liberties, and national security of our country. So on behalf of many of my fellow colleagues, many of which are veterans, active duty military members, and have been or are being needlessly put directly in harm's way, on behalf of our country's nation-building agenda, I applaud you for your authentic service and dedication to our country, and for drawing attention to the money and power-driven agenda of the global elites that has been destroying and pillaging our nation for far too long. So my twofold question for you is, will you seek to reform or repeal the Patriot Act, and should your efforts to reverse the nation's agenda dictating the continuance of the deeply harmful agenda I just referred to result in a massive loss of jobs or trigger a market crash, how will you prevent another too-big-to-fail scenario from unfolding that would throw many middle-class Americans into poverty, as did the last bailout?
So to be clear, your second question was about the banks, financial industry.
The too-big-to-fail kind of scenario unfolding, and then having to, when the markets crash, which has been repeatedly happening throughout for many decades, will that continue? How do we ameliorate those impact on our society?
Thank you. Two great questions, and thank you for bringing your experience to share your own voice on these issues that we're talking about. I really appreciate it, and obviously brings your own credibility and affirmation to both the truth of what we're dealing with and the challenges that we're up against. The Patriot Act, as you well know, is up for reauthorization next month. I think we need to both repeal and reform the Patriot Act. Because of the many provisions put into that Patriot Act in the wake of 9/11 that very directly undermine our constitutional rights and privacy and civil liberties, and how big the challenge is in Congress, where unfortunately we hear the same kind of fear tactics being pushed forward anytime we raise these issues of civil liberties and privacy, and how we as voters, we the people, should not ever have to choose between being safe and being free. They are not diametrically opposed objectives. That once again our founders had the foresight to recognize that we could have people in positions of power in our own government who might seek to erode our own freedoms for either their interests or, quote unquote, in the pursuit of security, which is why they said, if you want to come and surveil us as Americans or collect our own private and personal information, you got to have a warrant. It has to be for cause. So this is something, and there's a bipartisan coalition. We formed the Fourth Amendment Caucus in Congress, and we are working as we speak to try to bring about some of these changes since the Patriot Act is looking to be reauthorized. I would just ask all of you to help us in doing so, because what we have heard over the years as we have continued this work to protect our civil liberties and privacy is speeches on the House floor criticizing our efforts, saying, you just want to allow another 9/11 style attack to happen in this country. That if we are able to be successful in passing our legislation, then it is an open door for terrorists to come to America. It's these empty fear tactics that are being used, that we've seen them over and over and over again, not only in the post 9/11 era, but you've seen similar tactics being used in the past to help shore up the security state that so blatantly disregards our country's Constitution. Your second question is really, really important. All of these questions have been amazing and important, but it's something that not a lot of people are talking about, because it's easy to say, well, look, our economy is prospering, stocks are going up, GDP is going up, all of which are good things, but there is a deeper instability within our financial markets that people working in finance are really, really concerned about. The fact that those banks that were too big to fail in 2008 are even bigger today. And they are counting on the fact that not if, but when there is a collapse and failure, that we as taxpayers will once again bail them out because they're too big to fail. So it's understanding this. First of all, that's important. Understanding why it's critical that we reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act to help shore up and protect ourselves, to make sure that these big banks are not able to gamble with our money, and that they're separating commercial banking from the other banking practices that they are doing, but also that we recognize what went wrong in 2008. No one's been held accountable. And because we as taxpayers bailed out these big banks, even as there was no bailout for the people who lost their pensions, who lost their homes, who lost everything, we as taxpayers bailed out these banks, not allowing those who deserved to fail, and those who were doing the right thing, who had the resilience to persist, have created this shallow and shaky ground that we are faced with today. No one went to jail. So as you're asking, what do we do about this? I think we start to try to make these changes now to try to prevent and minimize the damage that will come when this happens. But I think it's important to have courageous leaders who are willing to actually lead and say, you know what? There is going to be a little bit of hardship and pain that comes with this, but it's essential for us to make sure that those who are gambling with our money without any regard for the consequence, that those who are failing because they have a failing practice are allowed to do so, and that we can grow in our own resilience and strengthen our economy as a result going forward. Thank you.
We are running out of time, so we have time for one last question.
I know. Last one there in the back.
My name is Julia, and I live in the territory of the Wabanaki Confederacy, as we all do here today. And I know that you opposed the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline in 2016. And my question for you is if and how you plan to uphold the sovereignty of the 573 federally recognized tribes of this country, as well as Native Hawaiians.
Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, there are too many examples to cite of how treaties have been completely ignored and dismissed, and the rights of both federally recognized tribes of First Peoples across this nation, but also those that exist in my home state of Hawaii who are not federally recognized, they must be respected and their rights must be upheld. I just saw in the last few days another tribe that lives along the border, I believe in Texas, I might have the state wrong, but seeing demolition and explosions on a land that was previously an ancestral burial ground for the first people whose reservation exists there, were not consulted at all before those demolitions took place. It's providing the leadership that recognizes the indigenous people of this country, the treaties that have been signed by leaders of the past, and making sure that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is not just some bureau in an office somewhere that holds really no clout or hold any sway in our government, but that actually has a seat at the table as we're making decisions about land rights, land usage, water rights, and valuing and honoring them and the land that belongs to them. All right, I'm sorry. We're more than out of time here. I apologize for those of you who I didn't get to your question. I want to thank you again for being here tonight. Thank you for making this time. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes if you want to come up and say hello, or if you want to take a picture. I think we'll be forming a line on this side and going out the other side. I think the main thing I hope that you leave with here tonight is that you have a clear choice in this election, and that it is your voice that has the power to send a message to Washington and to the nation about what kind of future you want to see for our country. So if you are sick and tired of the same old in Washington, sick and tired of politicians who say one thing but do another, sick and tired of politicians who talk a whole lot but don't listen at all, sick and tired of politicians who disregard your taxpayer dollars and how they are being spent and used, sick and tired of the powerful elite dictating the policies that impact our lives, and sick and tired of those in Washington carelessly sending more of our men and women needlessly into harm's way to fight in wars that do not make us any safer. Those who pay the ultimate price, who come home with both wounds that are seen and unseen, and those who come home in a coffin draped with a flag. Their service must be honored. Their sacrifice must be revered. If you want to see change, not change for the sake of change, but this change in our country's policies, our foreign policy, and in our government to one that is truly of, by, and for the people, not just in words, but in actions, then I invite you to stand with me. Please share this conversation that we've had here tonight with others. Please make sure that as you go and cast your votes on March 3rd, that you're bringing at least 5 people with you. And I hope you seriously consider casting your vote for me. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Have a great night. Aloha. Thank you.